find adventure at the click of a button, or from the turn of a page, or the casting of a die. Join your hosts, Coniff and Shiloh, on an unforgettable journey. Questing the Multiverse.
Round two? You up for round two, Shiloh?
Round two. Yes, sir. Let's go.
Okay. Gentlemen, ladies, everyone else, all people, welcome to episode 2 of Questing the Multiverse, in which Shiloh and I have hopefully ironed out any weird audio glitches that we had in the first episode. I'm Coniff.
I am Shiloh, and I apologize for my audio glitches. Apparently, I'm also a robot.
Oh, there's a bit of a robot on that voice right then, too. So it is what it is.
Really?
The way we record is a little bit different than I've done in the past with other podcasts, just because of the time that both of us have. I don't have time to sit and edit episodes after episode, week after week, for hours each day to get it perfect. So this is what you get, but you're going to get an honest look at what's going on in video games, what we're up to, and the adventures we're on. And that, I hope, is the bigger takeaway. So before we really dive in to what we have been, talking about with the show so far, which is really an in-depth look at Baldur's Gate 3, what have you been up to, Shiloh, lately in gaming? Like, kind of what's your, I guess, your modus operandi? Like, what have you been doing? And each episode will probably start with this, just because we don't always play together. Sometimes you're off doing who knows what in the middle of Guild Wars 2, and I'm doing who knows what in the middle of RuneScape. So we're not always like in sync with what we're playing. But it's good to take a look at kind of where we're at, especially because we're basically waiting for Baldur's Gate 3, which when you're listening to this episode, if you're listening on launch day, it will release like 3 to 4 days after this episode goes live. I think it's technically 3. So what have you been up to, Shiloh?
Guild Wars 2, primarily. I've got my second legendary, Orion's Claw, which is a dagger from the End of Dragons legendary track, I guess you'd call it. I don't know. But yeah, I kind of reached a goal, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit it, but I try to reach goal, or try to set goals for myself in that game in particular, because it is very achievement heavy and mastery heavy. At least for us that have not reached the full 455 or whatever it is, the premium,
the Sweat Lord
mastery cap,
mastery tier. Yes.
But my goal was to try to hit 400 and a 10K achievement score before Secrets of the Obscure launches on August 22nd. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit that. We'll see. I'm getting close. I'm almost to 9K achievement score and about 381 on the mastery total. So either way, I like the game because if I don't hit those things, whoop-de-doo. I'll just hit the ground running when Secrets of the Obscure launches and be good to go. So it's kind of a perfect casual MMO. You can play it as hardcore as you want, or you can play it as casual as you want, and there's really no penalty or drop off for that. So yeah. And this other game that we'll mention in a little bit, I think. But
yeah.
That's basically what I've been playing, is just a lot of Guild Wars 2 in between waiting and doing research for the podcast. So
yes, I am kind of in the same space as you. I have been playing Guild Wars 2 less than you, but currently the Festival of the Four Winds is going on, and I don't know when that ends. I know it's probably coming up, but it was the last event that you and I needed to experience in Guild Wars 2 to have experienced all of their events. So we got that little ascended token that allows you to teleport to whatever current event is active. But there was, what was it? The Mad King Festival, the Christmas, what did they call that? It wasn't called Christmas.
Winter's Day.
Winter's Day. There was the Lunar New Year Festival, I think.
Yep.
Super Adventure Box was in there. Then there was the Dragon Bash. And then this one. Is that all of them?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. So Festival of the Four Winds probably comes in at third. No, it's either second or third for me out of all of them. It is a very good festival. And really, every event and festival in Guild Wars 2 is a ton of fun. They put a lot of thought and energy into it, and the rewards are pretty decent too. Specifically with this one, there was the sun-gazed vision or sun-blessed vision or something where your eyes glow like with the fire of a sun and types, stuff. And I really wanted that, and so we achieved that. And then they put there's a shawl or something that is a shoulder motif. And a lot of the shoulder motifs, really in every game, every MMO that I've played, the shoulder motifs are usually the worst looking ones, unless you're going to play some heavy armored character in which you've got, big pauldrons and it fits your beefy, breastplate with your, not pauldrons, epaulets. I never know the freaking medieval terms for it, but...
One's heavy, one's light, but
yeah,
usually the shoulder cosmetics in most MMOs, I think. I don't know if they got the fashion designers from Knots Landing or Dynasty from the 1980s TV shows to do with the old 80s shoulder pads that women used to wear.
Oh, and the
80s,
dresses.
Yeah. That's what they always seem to look like. It's like, really? Okay, this is what we're going for, guys. But yeah, this shawl is really, it's a good looking thing because it works perfectly with the cloak. And
yes, it does.
So
I've got a nice little outfit with it. And I've completed ultimately everything I wanted to complete with this festival. And so to rank them, I think Mad King's Festival or the Mad King event, the Halloween is the hands down the best. I did the clock tower jumping puzzle like 300 times specifically because I just love jumping puzzles. And then the second is probably the Winter's Day because there's a lot of fun little mini games like the tower defense with the Dolyaks or whatever that are sitting in the middle that you have to protect.
Oh yeah.
And then of course is Festival of the Four Winds, and then I would say Super Adventure Box comes directly after that for me. And a lot of people might be like, well, you love jumping puzzles, why is Super Adventure Box so low? And it's because even though jumping and platforming is an element of Super Adventure Box, I prefer my jumping puzzles like pure jumping puzzle. So my favorite is Chalice of Tears because it's you just going from the bottom to the top, and if you know the route, it's a really fun and exhilarating jumping puzzle. I really do like Goem's Lab, I think is the one over in Metrica province, where it's got the 3 different stages, the wind, the lightning, and then the frost or whatever. It's a really fun jumping puzzle. So, but that's the point of it. So Super Adventure Box is more of like the achievement hunting, collection, grinding type thing. And I think that's fine. And I mean, I've got to hand it to ArenaNet because that's unlike any sort of event that's in any MMO ever. But it's just not my favorite. And then I'd say probably the Lunar New Year was next, and then Dragon Bash is last. But I just didn't really get into Dragon Bash, but we were also working on other things at the time, so it's kind of like, not my jam.
There wasn't a whole lot to Dragon Bash.
Yeah. But I do like, again, that ArenaNet puts this amount of effort into their events because honestly, like when you really get to looking at MMOs, they've evolved since the early days. You know, people used to sign into MMOs to chat with their friends and just hang out. Well, now we've got Discord for that. Or now we've got, you know, texting, Zoom, you know, whatever. There's a million ways to communicate with friends online. But back in the day, the chief one was, yeah, let's just get into World of Warcraft, or let's log into RuneScape, or, you know, EverQuest, and let's chat in game there, because there is no technology that lets us do a voice. You know, Ventrilo didn't exist back in 2004. I don't think. Maybe it did. And of course, that was before the Discord era. So anyway, that's a long tangent, but that's Coniff, baby. But I've also been playing RuneScape because they are releasing the 30th or 29th skill. And it's a new combat skill, which is the first, like an actual combat skill. And it's the first one since the game's launch in 2001. And so that skill is necromancy. And throughout this, you're learning this power, and then you're going to be fighting against the first necromancer, who's kind of the big bad guy of this expansion, or this new skill. RuneScape doesn't do like expansions in the traditional sense. They just do these big game updates. So, and it's currently double XP. And so that's an event where you get 2 times the XP for everything you do, with some exceptions. And so our friend Metalis and I have been hard at work on our maxed level characters to get some skills like herb lore or herb lore. I hate the word herb and herb, by the way, because saying herb, you know, sounds proper, but saying herb lore doesn't sound right to me for some reason. I'm probably just strange. I'd like to say herb lore, but then that sounds weird too. So I just don't like that word, Shiloh. but that's the skill that we've been leveling right now, is blank lore, and it's
Blank lore.
Yeah, in RuneScape, it's a really expensive skill to train. So for the uninitiated, think like if the potion making, and that's kind of what it is, right? It's about potion making, which help in combat. So think like potion making or alchemy in ESO, but then make it like, you know, hundreds of thousands of gold in ESO to train to level 50. That's kind of what it's like in this game.
All right.
So anyway, that's what we've been up to. And then I've also been playing Halo Infinite on PC because I discovered that I'm not terrible at Tactical Slayer. And so Halo Infinite was it was like amazing the first month it launched. And then 343 basically just sat on the IP for months and months, and super disappointed. But it's now in a state where it's fun to play, I think. And especially, as you mentioned, you know, being in the interim of what the heck are we doing with our life, you know, while we wait for Baldur's Gate 3. It's just been a fun, mindless entertainment to jump into. But the real story here, listener, is none of those games. It's a game that launched last week. So what was that? July 28th, 27th-ish?
Yeah, I think 27th. I don't know. Whatever.
Someday last week, but if you're listening this way in the future, then good luck. But that game is Remnant 2. Shiloh, tell the people what you told me today. And I have played a bit now, and Tempest jumped into my game randomly, and so I played with him. But tell the people your initial thoughts on Remnant 2, because neither of us are very far into it.
Yeah, so anyone not familiar, and I know that I sure wasn't. I never played Remnant 1. Had no idea. It was not on my radar, and I don't know if probably on a lot of people's radars. But, you know, maybe
in light of what's currently coming out soon, you know, it's kind of getting overshadowed.
But I guess my initial impression was this game is like the Destiny that I kind of wish that Destiny still was or could have been, as far as just the feel of it. And that's not taking away anything from Destiny. I love Destiny, and I love Destiny 2. But if you had a child, if Destiny 2 or the OG original Destiny had a child with Elden Ring, I think this is what would become of that in Remnant 2. And I don't know if that does that seem fair? That's the feel that I get from this game, with a little bit of I don't know. It's just a really interesting, fun but challenging but rewarding.
Yeah, very rewarding
game. And I honestly, I can't wait to play tonight after we get done. But and a lot of that has to do with I know what's coming on Thursday. So
yes,
this is going to be a good game, and I'm glad I bought it, even though they sell plasma to get it. I'm just kidding. I'm not selling plasma.
Or a kidney. It's not even. It wasn't even that. It was actually $50 rather than
and it is fairly affordable too. That's the other thing. So
not 50. Was it 50 or was it 60?
$49.
Yeah,
I'm sure if you got the pre-order, it was 60 or up. Depending on your pre-order. I just bought the base game, so
yeah,
$49.90 something on Steam. It's also available on Xbox, and I'm pretty sure it's available on PS5. Don't really know that for a fact, but I'm pretty sure it is. But yeah, I highly recommend anyone that it would enjoy, or that it really loves Destiny and loved Elden Ring, to pick this game up like immediately. if you've at least thought or tinkered with either one of those games, and maybe this is something you're like, I don't know, I'll just wait to see how the verdict plays out. Definitely pick this up as well.
It's got the Souls-like combat with guns. But it's a looter shooter in the sense like you're gonna find loot on the ground in hidden locations, which is not so Destiny. That's more like Elden Ring or Dark Souls, where you're going around the map and then all of a sudden you found this sort of passageway. But the thing, and it's got good multiplayer, you can hop in at any time. It's pretty well thought out. Like those who've played Dark Souls or Elden Ring, there's the bonfires or the sites of grace that are like your respawn locations or your rest stops, and every time you rest there, it respawns enemies. And so you'll go through in Remnant 2 and there's these like crystals or something. I don't remember what they're called. Shards, maybe? Something.
Don't remember their name.
I literally probably have like 60 minutes in that game, maybe a little more, but 60 minutes of actually getting into it. And it's fun because like if you die, you'll go in a down state, which is more like, honestly, I haven't played Destiny in so long. You just die, don't you? Your ghost pops up and then you can be rezzed from there. Right. It's similar in this game. You go down and then you can be rezzed. But if you get killed, which is unlike Destiny, but if you get killed while you're downed, then the only way to get rezzed is your other party member which this is if you're playing with other people, the other party member has to go to one of these shards and resurrect you. And so it's a really fun dynamic. And the world that I'm in, which I'm assuming is the same one as you, it's the old English haunted village town. Does that ring a bell to you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's probably like the first one that most people or everyone starts out. I'm not sure. It's very like narrow corridors between these tall Victorian era style buildings. And it's really neat. Like it's just a fun game, and so many games are trying to do new stuff and trying to do new things and just be great and, break the mold and whatever. But this game is just plain fun. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just, I am enjoying playing it, even if I'm not that great at it,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they've incorporated, it's almost its own genre because it's really hard to pin down. And they've incorporated a lot of the best of certain genres and packed them into one game.
Yes.
So you have Souls-like elements, you have explorer, puzzle solving stuff that's going on. You've got the RPG elements of multiple classes that you have to find out in the world, evidently by crafting. And there's kind of this RNG, from what I can tell, because the world is procedurally generated, so it's not always the same. Like what I popped into, what my instance was at the start was probably a little bit different from what you started with. And that can be that kind of lends to a lot of replayability, because one of the best ways to get gear evidently from the game is to, once you've beaten a zone, is to go back in adventure mode and
Just
do it
explore.
over again.
Yeah.
But it won't be the same. So you might get a completely new boss that drops a certain ring or a certain weapon or something, or even just a crafting material that you really need for something else. And so you go back until you find that. Or I know there's the new sorcerer class that people have unlocked. You need like a blood moon to pop up in a certain zone that, and if it doesn't
really
pop,
neat.
just stuff like that. And like, yeah, this is a game I can totally get. I could totally get on board with, because I love that kind of stuff. It's just fascinating to me.
So I don't know if we're going to do an episode on this. I mean, we're going to be doing Baldur's Gate 3 for the next few episodes for sure. And once that game drops, I'm going to play some Remnant 2, no doubt. But like, that just means, Halo, goodbye Halo for now. You're being replaced by Remnant 2. RuneScape, I might just relegate to second monitor again while I'm doing stuff in Remnant 2. Because for the most part, Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be our big focus in our friend group too, not just you and I. So great game. If you are on the fence, I know our buddy Stark really wants to pick it up. He saw me playing today and sent me a message. And when he listens to this episode, he'll be on the road moving states. So shout out to Stark for being a real one, and family, assuming you're subjecting them to this podcast in the car as well. But,
we're sorry.
But no joke, Remnant 2 is great fun if you're on the fence. Don't be. It's well worth the $50 price tag at least. So that's our early thoughts on that, I'd say. But before we get into, because we did last episode, we sort of teased the first video game face-off, and we're going to get into that in a second. There is one more piece of news that came this week in the video game sphere that at least hit our circles of friends, and that's that Final Fantasy XIV not only is coming out with a new expansion called Dawn Trail, which looks to be a sort of like coastal, tropical themed expansion, but it's finally releasing on Xbox Series X. Is it just X and S, or are they going back to the one as well?
No,
Good, because
as far as I know, is X and S.
They need to
They've
let
also
the one
released
die.
graphical improvements, so
Yes,
that might be a reason why it's not going out for the OG X.
but that's
previous.
a huge deal. This is a huge deal for Xbox, because ultimately the only console MMO that you really had access to that I would argue is worth your time would be Elder Scrolls Online. There is BDO, and so I don't want to discredit BDO, but as far as the big worldwide MMOs go, Elder Scrolls Online was your only option. Well, as of the spring or sometime in 2024, no longer. It's coming to Xbox, and or Final Fantasy XIV is coming to Xbox, and now you can finally know what Limsa Lominsa is all about.
Enjoy.
It'll be
it's going to
eye-opening.
It's going to be fun, because I know there are groups of our friends that would have loved to play Final Fantasy XIV and just never, I personally before I had this PC, I bought a PS4 Pro, a used one, just so I could play Final Fantasy XIV on a kind of a lapse during my ESO years, and loved it. But I played it on a console, so and I can honestly say that playing that game on a console it sounds hard, but it's really well done. Like their control setup is really well done. There are certain classes, or not classes, jobs that would be difficult to play just because of all the skills and stuff needed that, for hotbars and on a PC is just a lot easier to manage. But there are certainly jobs that you can kind of finagle in the console UI to kind of make it work out perfectly, and it'll be fun and I'm really happy that game in particular is coming out for the Series S and X. But
I looked and I couldn't find this information, but has there been any information on if it should all be cross-play, right? Like between PC, PlayStation, and Xbox folks?
I looked and I didn't see any information. I don't know if that's been confirmed or leaked out, but I would assume that they would just,
bring them into the same servers.
Bring them into, like here's your long list of North American and here's your long list of European and Asia, Ocean, Pacifica, or whatever they want to call it, different servers that they have. So that would be my guess. So you'll have, PC players, PS4, PS5 players playing with Xbox, and it'll be good times. So, and I don't know if they've actually, I'm sure that maybe Final Fantasy XVI might be in the foreseeable future as well. Because I think it was a kind of a joint confirmation that Square Enix and Phil Spencer basically has kind of bridged the gap with Square Enix. And so hopefully down the road, we'll be able to see Final Fantasy 16. And
that'd be nice.
They have 15 in the previous iterations, but just not 16 yet. Don't even have that for the PC yet. So
gotcha.
We'll see. Yeah.
Well, Shiloh, do you know what time it is?
Yeah, I've got my...
Ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've been waiting for. Video Game Face-Off!
I absolutely cut you off with that.
Oh, no.
But, it is what it is. Video Game Face-Off. This is the first one. I did want to point out to our listeners that if you want to keep up with the bracket for this, in our Discord server, there is a channel dedicated to I'm just going to post every time the bracket changes. And so if you want to see that, join our Discord server. Also in that Discord server is a channel where after each episode goes live, we'll share any relating topics or resources, for instance, like maybe a news article about Final Fantasy XIV or, whatever. Just any sort of material that we deem as, extracurricular resources for our episodes are going to go into that channel. Shiloh posts some, I'll post some, so on and so forth. So make sure you join our Discord server to keep up with both those things, should that interest you. But this face-off is Hell Let Loose from 2021 versus Destiny 2 from 2017. So what we're going to do, and what we're going to do in each of these face-offs, is we're going to talk about what each game is, sort of our take on it, real brief, not like a full episode's worth. And then I want us to each do our gut knee-jerk pick on which one we're choosing, just with some fun memories from either or. And then we're going to do the video game rating system breakdown score. And so we'll get into that so we can give it a definitive score, which I've got a running tally of every game we're going to do. And then we'll tease the next matchup and mention whether or not it's going to appear in the next episode, which we will not be doing one next episode, because next episode is going to be all Baldur's Gate 3. So, what is Hell Let Loose? Now, Shiloh, you've never played this game, but what Hell Let Loose is sort of I guess bridging the gap between like a full military sim like Arma 2, and if that's not a full military sim, you get the point. Like, it's a big multi-unit battle, whatever, or squad, and it's bridging that gap between those and something like Battlefield. And it's World War II, and so you're either Axis or Allies, and those Allies forces could be British, could be Russian, or could be US, and then the Axis is German. So you play across multiple maps that are I would say historically accurate. I've never been, but I know that at least on the game's launch, the old developer, which was Black Matter, really put a lot of work into somewhat historical accuracy. Now Team 17, who bought the game from them, I think they're still doing an all right job of maintaining that. There's no like Banana Man skins or, like some like MMA chick fighter skin like, COD might have, or Fortnite. So it's very historically accurate in at least the way things look. But there are some inaccuracies, like in the weapons used in certain fight. And the people that are really into the World War II nerd stuff, like, they're calling it out and whatever. But as far as the way it plays, like, you've got a commander, you've got officers, and then you've got just, squad mates. The commander, there's one per team, so 2, and they're 50v50 matches. And then you've got an officer ahead of each squad that can chat with the commander and every other officer in its own comlink channel. And then squads can talk amongst themselves, and this is like voice chat, right? And then there's an area chat. So it's basically just a giant battle across a huge open map, like Utah Beach, like Omaha Beach, Hurtgen Forest, Foy. So there's a snow map. And we've played, and I say we, like our friends and us, myself, Stark, and several others, but Stark is kind of the one that was playing this before any of us were and was really the one to show us the ropes. Hell Let Loose is probably my favorite PvP FPS game that I've ever played. But that is all it is. It is only the PvP 50v50 matches. There's no single player campaign, and I really don't think there should be. Like, you're just kind of making stuff up. But for now, it's just this big PvP game, and that's the whole focus. And there's a whole lot more that I could touch on. But Shiloh, why don't you give your brief rundown for anybody who wouldn't know what Destiny 2 is? If you've never heard of it somehow.
Yeah, if somehow you've lived in a closet for the past, since 2014 when the original Destiny 1 released.
Yes.
But yeah, it's made by Bungie, who obviously made Halo 1 and 2. That's
and
where they got
3 and Reach.
3 and Reach, yeah.
I think those are the only ones.
Yeah.
And maybe Halo Wars, I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if they did Halo Wars. Maybe, I don't know. But anyway, an original IP created by Bungie, Destiny 1 was the predecessor. And you basically are, I guess, a revivable
superhero,
yeah.
With guns.
I would say God, but that's a little over the top. But you have
So
angel, how about that? Or devil, depending on your.
And we won't get
outtake.
into it, but there's a ton of like lore with Destiny, you know, a huge amount of backstory and stuff, but continue.
Yeah. So it started with the Traveler, who is basically a large volleyball in the sky. And kind of their essence of light. And the Traveler sends these ghosts down to Earth and the other planets to revive guardians. And they are the protectors and basically grant these guardians power of immortality.
Yep. Among other powers, too.
Amongst the other powers, which are previously were solar, arc, and void based powers in the original Destiny 1. That branched off a little bit. And then in Destiny 2, when Beyond Light hit, you got the power of stasis. And then most recently in Lightfall, you got the power of Strand.
But it's worth noting, those are darkness powers,
Those
not
are darkness powers.
light. So they're not given by the Traveler.
Yeah. But it's a first person shooter. Some would call it I would call it a kind of MMO light.
Very light, yeah.
Kind of MMO lobby style. Kind of in the same vein that you could call the original Guild Wars 1 an MMO. You basically have a hub and send out on missions. You can have fire teams that consist of 3 fire team members. And there was a whole campaign, the Red War campaign for Destiny 2 that has since been retconned, I suppose.
Yeah.
But they have raids, they have strikes, which are basically dungeons. There's a whole PvP in the Crucible. There's the Trials of Osiris, which is the Sweat Lord version of PvP, where you kind of
where you will never find Shiloh
and eventually get to the lighthouse. Yeah, I've played a little bit, just to get some guns, and got my guns and left. I'm done with
got my guns. I'm going home.
Yep, I'm going home,
which is totally
out of
fair.
Here. Yeah. But yeah, in a nutshell, that is Destiny 2. If you, like I said, were stuck in a closet from 2014 to 2023. But
yes.
I'm sure that everyone, and obviously you have voice actors that have been well known. You had Peter Dinklage, who was the original Ghost for Destiny 1. Might have leaked to 2. No, I don't think he ever made it to Destiny 2 as the voice actor. But you have Nathan Fillion, most probably the best known voice actor, slash actor from Firefly and other things.
The Rookie or something.
Played the beloved Cade 6. You have Gina Torres actually was the original Ikora, correct? And
I think so. the late great Lance Reddick.
Yeah, rip. Yep.
As Zavala. So it's a pretty big, budget game for sure. Yeah. And that's still going too, like as far as like new story content.
Yeah. Most recent expansion aside, it's been under a lot of scrutiny, but Bungie has generally been under scrutiny before, and they generally bounce back. So I have faith that hopefully they can turn the ship around for not Lightfall, the Final Shape. Is their last chapter in this whole epic battle versus darkness thing that they have going on with the oh crap, what's his name?
The Witness, right?
The Witness.
Yeah.
Yep. Can I get a witness? But it's obviously, if we're gonna go into gut knee-jerk reactions right now, I have to pick Destiny 2 because it's the only one that I've played. So there's no real, I can't really say, well, yeah, Hell Let Loose takes the cake, unless I really did not like Destiny 2, which is obviously not the case because I've played since
So my gut knee-jerk reaction is Hell Let Loose. And the reason why is because I can get into that game, and it, like, the best part of Destiny 2 is playing with friends, right? At least for me. Some of the story beats are really good, but the problem is you can't play those anymore. That's my biggest gripe with Destiny 2 is they have sunsetted or removed from availability the Red War campaign, the Warmind, the Osiris DLC, what's the Cade 6 one? What's it called?
Oh, Tangled
Shore. Like, all of that you can't play. So people who bought that, you know, once upon a time, and maybe they bought it into it like 4 years ago, and they're like, yeah, I want to play some Destiny. Sorry, everything you knew about the game, you can't do. So, and that's, you know, a decision that Bungie made. I don't agree with it. I don't think it's a good decision, but they made that decision because the game on the back end was very bloated. And I mean, I do recall on console hitting my menu button and it taking a solid 10 to 15 seconds for my character to pop up and me even be able to change gear. Whereas on PC, it was instant, and, you know, all this for the people with high-end rigs. So my initial gut knee-jerk reaction is Hell Let Loose. And I mean, I've had a ton of amazing times playing that game with our friends, you know, in a full squad. Or there was a day that Stark and I got into a sniper squad, because there's only 2 recon squads per team. So you're not going to get just blasted by like 30 people with sniper rifles. It's only ever 2. And they do have a job, which is to go destroy enemy artillery, which is on the back line. So you're usually not going to run into a recon squad and a sniper. With that said, sometimes you do, and unfortunately for the American army on this particular match that Stark and I were playing Germans on, I got like 45 sniper kills in this single match. It was glorious. Loved it. They just kept coming. They just kept running into my bullets, and I couldn't stop. Couldn't stop it. So it's just a lot of fun memories, and the entire thing is, multiplayer, and that's kind of where I lean nowadays. So, but I mean, you can't not include some of the raids we did in Destiny 2. Like, those were really fun. But it's just, I don't know, where I'm at now, like, Destiny 2 really just needs to overhaul. Like, I want that story back. Like, that's my biggest thing. So, let's go through this really quick. We'll give it a score since we're not lined up. So, we'll start with Destiny 2 because we both have played that. So, controls out of 0 to 20 points, how do you feel that game controls? I would probably say like a 17, 18. Like, it's pretty smooth, honestly, gunplay wise.
Destiny 2?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't play a ton of FPS.
Yep.
But I know that game in particular.
Definitely. I'm going to give it an 18 then.
Yeah, I would say at least an 18. I mean, it's probably one of the best. I mean, Bungie's well known for that.
So next up,
and it still hasn't. It's never really declined in that department.
Yeah, that is true. Next up is pacing and progression, 0 out of 15. This is where they kind of take a hit, I think, because the pacing for leveling your armor and stuff is abysmal, and I don't think it's ever really changed, honestly.
No, the light level in that game is very. It got so arbitrary that they completely removed levels from the game. I don't remember if you remember when you had levels 1 to 20, and it was like, really, why bother with that? But we still have light levels in that game, which I understand because it enables them to scale how difficult harder content is. Grandmaster Nightfalls and, master raids and stuff like that. You need a certain light level or you're just going to get blown out of the sky. And so I understand that. It's the getting the constant chasing your own tail to get to a certain point over and over and over again.
Yes.
It gets hard in that game, although it's become a lot easier to kind of get to a certain point, but you're still constantly trying to keep up with the Joneses in that game.
I'm going to say 9 or 10 then out of 15.
Yeah, I would say that's fair, honestly. It is one of my... Yeah, let's go with 9. That's fine.
Okay, so UI design, honestly, this is out of 15 again. I would probably give this a 12, I guess. There are some things in the menus I don't like, but as far as like the actual gameplay FPS elements, they're pretty solid, and it's, you can see everything that you need to see.
Yeah,
so
I think the UI is pretty solid, and even the...
I'll bump it to 13 then. Is that
fair? Even because they've made improvements to the paper doll, as I like to call it, paper doll UI, when you actually get to view your character and your equipment and your loadouts and stuff like that, has been drastically improved, and it pops up almost immediately now, whereas it used to be a little bit of a lag. And that game in particular has one of the greatest features in a quote-unquote MMO, is the ability to inspect your character in the middle of a load-in screen.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. That's
pretty top notch. Like, there have been times when I've been in ESO or been in Final Fantasy, hell, even been in Guild Wars, where I'm like, I would really like to look at my something so I could use this while I'm sitting here waiting for something, and I can't do it. So I have to sit here and look at this art. So
okay.
I would say 13.
Okay, so microtransactions is either a 0 points for poorly implemented pay-to-win whatever, a 7 for kind of just meh, or a 15 for well done, not too costly, no pay-to-win. I'm leaning on a 7 for that one, like just the middle of the ground, because it's some of it is pretty pricey. So
yeah, and it's all cosmetic, but it is fairly pricey for what you're getting out of it.
So next up is sound and music design, which is out of 20 points. I think this gets a 20. The sound and the music is
amazing.
It's amazing. Art design is also out of 20. Which is kind of the overall like graphic design of everything. I would say that's up there, probably a 19, 18 or 19 for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's do level world design. So you can see, if you're watching this on YouTube, this episode, in the background, Shiloh has Destiny 2 art hanging on his wall. And the one on the left, shrouded by the lights, is just a good example of how well Bungie implements like set pieces into a game, like where you enter an area or you go into something and it's just this gorgeous, vista or what have you that's you're just faced with, and so they're very good at that. And overall, like, the actual zones are pretty fun. I mean, the ones that are still in the game.
The ones that are left.
Because I really liked Titan, and I know Titan kind of made a comeback in the most recent expansion, but so I'd give this a solid 25 out of 30.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, we'll go with that.
Okay, so social engagement, 0 out of 15, which could either be how fun is it to interact with, play with other people, maybe watch and learn about the game on YouTube, all sorts of stuff. I'm going to say it's out of 15. I'm going to say this is a really fun, like, honestly, it's more fun as a social game now. Even just like watching, like, my name is Bife. Is it Bife? Yeah, my name is Bife lore videos. Like, that's a ton of fun. I'm going to give that a 15 because it is like solo. Destiny 2 is not great in my opinion.
No.
So,
and as a community, generally, it's a pretty good community. I think Destiny's community is pretty good. I know that we've had a few boogers that we had to bring into Vault of Glass runs.
Yep.
But all in all, like we've also had some pretty good peoples that have joined us in those types of things as well. So yeah, I would say.
Yeah.
What was the top? What was
15? I gave it a 15. Yeah.
Yeah, let's just go with that.
The next up is narrative, and this is where Destiny 2 is going to take a hit because while some of the stuff is very interesting, so like the Witch Queen DLC was a lot of fun, but it was more fun because the design of that world was really, really neat, just Savathun's throne world and everything. Mm-hmm. But you have to like either watch it on YouTube or go read countless grimoire, note card. I think they were cards, right, in the first game.
Yeah.
Referred to. So but you just can't get the whole story in Destiny 2. So I'm gonna give it a hit. I would personally say like 8 or 9 for narrative. Even though the narrative that is in there is fun, but it feels a little more disjointed at times because you're missing that entire, back half of the original part of the game. So,
yeah, that's very fair. They've always suffered from what I like to call sitcom-itis, where they have this ongoing story, and then all of a sudden you're, sitting down eating dinner with Saint 14. It's like I've always thought that, like I'm like, well, wait, why are we on Neptune? And
yeah, it just
who
doesn't
are these
make sense sometimes.
Silver Surfer guys? Like I don't really understand some of the left turns at Albuquerque that they end up taking, but it's that's a fair assessment. Like I really wish that they would just stick to all narrative and just go with it, because when they do that, like their cutscenes, like if you think about the Forsaken campaign, like that is probably one of the best, probably if not the best moment in Destiny history, but some would say like the Taken King from the original OG Destiny or something like that. But I would have to say the Forsaken story is amazing. Even the Red War stuff, although I still prefer the Forsaken stuff over that. And then you get these, the seasonal model. I don't know. Like I would prefer them to just
confusing how they do it. So.
Yeah, it's a very strange model system. If they actually ran it like an MMO and they just let everything stay and go and then just expand it and branch outwards rather than try to streamline everything, I think they'd be better off. But
yeah,
that's just me. But yeah, what'd you say, 9?
Yeah, out of 15.
That's fair. I would just go 9 or 10. So
we've got 3 more here, and then I'm going to speed run through the Hell Let Loose ones because we still got a ton to talk about in this episode. Yep. But for replayability for Destiny 2, this is also where it gets a hit, because while the game is fun, the grind of doing the same 4 things week after week once you've completed like the season story is not fun. And the only purpose for doing it is to get your light level up. And once a new chapter or a new season comes out, surprise, got to do it all over again. And for me, that's the replayability is why I'm not currently playing it, just because it's like it's just too much. Like Bungie wants Destiny 2 to be your lifestyle game, and I'm personally not in a place where I have any sort of lifestyle games that I'm just always gonna play. I'll take long breaks here and there. So out of 20, I'm gonna give it like at least 10. Is that fair, or maybe do you think it should have more?
Yeah, I think that's fair. It does suffer a lot from the same old, especially when a newer player probably wouldn't think that, but once you've basically have all the exotic weapons, you have all your exotic armor, you're just waiting for expansions to come out and maybe piddle around in a season, maybe get an exotic from that, and then just move on. Like, it's just, there's really not a lot else to the game once you do that. And that's, some people would argue that that's not the point, but, for a player like me that's not into PvP, that kind of is the point. So,
okay. So then nostalgia is a 0 out of 15. What score would you give it? Just out of 15, what number off the top of your dome?
Nostalgia?
Which would be more like you have fond memories playing it. Like, the longer you look back on it, the more you're like, oh yeah, like that was a really good game, like a really good time, like really good game.
That would be really high.
I would agree.
And I bring probably some of the pinnacle gaming moments of my recent career. It's not really a career, but gaming life. We'll just say that. Deepstone Crypt. Mm-hmm. Think about that. 0 Hour. You think about that one. The Forsaken campaign. Completing, or just even getting to explore. The dungeon in the Dreaming City.
Dreaming City, Shattered Throne, I think it was.
The Shattered Throne, yeah. It's a little black and white, but that's what it's supposed to be. It's a Shadow Realm. I would have to go really high. What'd you say, out of 20?
15.
Out of 15?
You could give it a 15 if you want.
14.
Okay. Shiloh has spoken. And then the last section is time played. Both of us have over 200 hours in Destiny 2, so that gets the max points of 30.
I'm probably ashamed to say how many hours I have.
So we have given Destiny 2, after you add everything up, it is a 79 out of 100 percentage-wise. So a score of 79. So now I'm going to do Hell Let Loose real quick. The controls are out of 20. There's some things like jumping over fences that just drive me nuts, or how long it takes a German to twist the little knob on his grenade and then chuck it. I'm going to give this like a 15 or 14, probably 14. That's out of 20. So pacing and progression out of 15. I'm probably just going to say a 10. The grind kind of comes alive once you reach level 5 in any of the different classes you can play, or I guess archetypes. So I'm going to give it a 10 out of 15. UI design is, it is what it is. I'll give it a 12 because out of 15, it's just kind of whatever. Microtransactions, I'm going to give it the full 15 because so far it is only historically accurate stuff. There is currently no in-game store, and all of the microtransactions are DLC that you can buy on Steam. And I want to say the most expensive one is like $7 or $9. Like that's pretty good. Yeah. And none of it's pay to win unless you're kind of a fool and you wear snow camo in the middle of France in the middle of summer. So that's on you, dog. Sound and music design, I'm going to give it a 19 out of 20. There's no music, but the sound design is pretty fantastic. I'm knocking a point from giving it full points because of the British guns are not great. So they sound horrible. Art design out of 20, I'm also going to give it a 19 because it looks, for a game that's in Unreal Engine 4, it's older. Like, I don't think there's ray tracing. It looks great. The maps are very well detailed. It's gorgeous. Level and world design out of 30, I'm giving it a 25. They're great maps, honestly. Some of them are little worse than others. I'm about to die in my... So tell a joke, Shiloh. Do you have a joke?
Do I have a joke about Hell Let Loose?
About anything. Oh my God. I had to get water. My throat just went went into the
hope
dry
everyone
zone.
stay hydrated. It's
Yeah, you got to
it's
stay
hot.
hydrated. Podcasting 101, stay hydrated. It's also like the hottest it's ever been on Earth. So
Oh, today? I know
just
that.
in this summer so far.
Yeah, July 3rd was the hottest day ever recorded on Earth. Did you know that?
Nope, but that doesn't
Yep.
surprise me. So level world design out of 30, I'm giving it a 25. Social engagement, English hard. Out of 15, it gets a 15. The entire game is built around social engagement. And when you have a commander and squad leads that their brains are still in their heads and they still have the ability to use that brain and use it to produce words that are intelligent and actually helpful, the game is like sublime. So it gets the max of 15. Narrative out of 15. This game gets a 2 or a 1. It probably could get a 0, but I'm going to give it a 2
Not a
because,
lot of talking, huh?
well, there's no story. But it's World War
Well,
II,
yeah.
so there's a bit of a historical element. So I wanted to give it
Yeah.
some points, but I mean, there's no like, if there was like a Band of Brothers tie-in, maybe it would get more points on the narrative front, but it gets a 2 because you really kind of create your own narrative. And
Yeah.
so replayability is easily a 20. It's one of the most replayable games like this just because every match can go different. You could have played on the same match or map hundreds of times and it's never going to be the same just because that's the human element, right? So
Yeah.
nostalgia, probably a little less at like, out of 15, I'd probably give it like a 12 because I do have a lot of fond memories playing it and looking back on it, from when we first started. There's that element of like, man, you were such like a noob at the very beginning. But it's not like there's not those heartbreaking story moments that some games have that would really make you look back and be like, oh man, I wish I could play that game again for the first time. So I'll give that a 12 out of 15. Time played, I also have over 200 hours. And Shiloh's never played it, but that's just, you're not like a big FPS person. So I will give that, if we do the average, so that's 100, we'll give it 23 points. We'll see what happens here. Oh my, this is very close, Shiloh. Wait, did the math not change? Oh wait, what's the score? Oh, interesting. Okay. So, the score and the game that moves on to the next round in the video game face-off bracket is actually Destiny 2. Now, Stark, don't get mad. Don't shut off the episode because the score for Hell Let Loose is an 80.9. And the score for Destiny 2 is actually an 81.7. The 79 I said before was without time. So if you don't factor in the time clause, Hell Let Loose comes ahead. But if you do, and that's simply because Shiloh's never played it. But there has to be some sort of balance for games that Shiloh and I have both never played, or one of us has played and one of us hasn't. And we're just going to take the average for both of us for each game. So that's kind of the killer. But honestly, both games are great, but Destiny 2 does have a bit of an edge because there's just more to it, an all-encompassing package, I'd say. So
Yeah.
All right, I'm actually surprised. I thought Hell Let Loose was going to take it because of some of the the replayability and what was it? What was the other one we dinged? The narrative, I guess. Kind of. We dinged those on Destiny 2 hard, but all right.
Yeah, but everything else is
Pretty good, yeah.
pretty solid.
So next matchup, which won't be next episode, but the next time we do this segment, the next matchup is Half-Life 2 from 2004 versus Monster Hunter World from 2018. So that should
Valve
be
versus Capcom.
Yeah, Valve versus Capcom in a fight to the death. So
Fight.
Crowbar Gordon Freeman versus giant dragon dinosaur.
Fatality.
So, all right, enough of that.
Yep.
Well, if it isn't our two illustrious adventurers, friends, you should read what they're really saying about you in the latest Baldur's Mouth.
What sort of wild tales are they spinning this time?
Grab a seat and I'll bring you some ale. Why don't you tell me what really happened?
And tell you what really happened, we will next episode. No, and cut the episode. So in like an elevator pitch or less, what did we cover last episode, Shiloh, if you can think back that far?
Oh, man. What did we cover?
Basically kind of the setting, right? I think.
Yeah, the setting, the bigger picture of the world, kind of the information, I guess you'd call it the selling points, the bullet points of why you should get the game, or what would be advertised as the biggest draws, the amount of hours it's going to take to play and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was a very kind of I'm not going to say we pitched Baldur's Gate 3 because that's not our job, but that's Larian's job. But
and they've done a good job of that.
They've done a pretty good job. We're here talking about it. So yeah.
Also, we talked about the setting, I think, and kind of what the setup is, and that Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are not really important for you to play to jump into Baldur's Gate 3. So that was good. So, we'll get into some more of, I guess, the game-specific stuff in this episode, but also some of the lore and whatnot. But before we do, there's a hot button topic surrounding Baldur's Gate 3, and no, it's not the Druid Bear thing.
Fun time.
This is a family-friendly show, Shiloh.
Yeah, we'll just call it fun time.
The topic, the hot button topic, is actually this. I guess it was like a tweet or a tweet longer or a zeet. Are we calling it a zeet now? I have no clue. I refuse to. It's just the X site now, which is not.
I have a hard time calling them tweets, but yeah. So zeet is certainly out of the question.
Certainly out of the question. I don't really care what he does with Twitter or X or whatever you want to call it, but it's just mega confusing when you've spent the last 10 years of your life thinking one way.
Especially if you're old like me and just recently reinstalled Twitter to keep up with the podcast, and then all of a sudden I look at my phone and there's a big X there, and I'm
like, oh, I didn't install this.
Oh dear, okay, yeah, delete. clear cache. But
so that's a side. Obviously, I have a giant X on my hat, listener. If you watch on YouTube, Xbox hat. So the hot button topic is that somebody tweeted out this whole paragraph or two of how people need to not expect the same quality that Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be of other games. Now, they get into it a little bit with how you really shouldn't expect the same quality from small developers and publishers, and that I agree with. Like something like Team Cherry, who is like 3 people that put out Hollow Knight. Even though Hollow Knight is phenomenal, like you can't expect 3 people to put out a game that is the same scope and quality of Baldur's Gate 3. With that said, there were some AAA developers, or some discussion about AAA developers saying that the same thing, that you can't expect every game to be as good as Baldur's Gate 3. And from the AAA side of things, I reject that, because it's like you've got the budget, to put out a game that's, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of a budget. Your game should be good. And furthermore, from the perspective of like how Baldur's Gate 3 shouldn't raise the standard or anything. Like, I also kind of disagree with that because, you know, like that's how we get better games going forward. You know, that's games come out that are exceptional and they break the market. They break the mold, and then other games strive to match that. And so you get innovation, you get better quality. You know, you can love or hate Fortnite, but the way Fortnite handled its explosion with weekly updates, you know, a cash shop that was 0 loot boxes, that was just a revolving door of items. Sure, they cashed in on FOMO, so, you know, you never know when you're going to get the Pizza Man skin again. God forbid you miss out on that. You need to buy it immediately because you don't know when it's coming back. So there was that element. But the way Epic handled Fortnite's growth and just explosion in popularity was a new standard going forward. And you can say what you want, but that game has made, you know, fists full of money left and right. And so it's, you know, you should strive to emulate some success of these very big and successful games because they are industry standards. You know, you're not going to look back in 20 years and be like, man, you know, Outriders was great. You're going to look back in 20 years and be like, man, no game has touched Baldur's Gate 3 in the past 20 years. Those are the articles people are going to be writing about. So I've just vomited all over the microphone my thoughts on this. Shiloh, let's get your thoughts. And I just wanted to do this quick, you know, get this topic out of the way before we actually dive into what's important, which is what's Baldur's Gate 3. You know, so.
I mean, you could say, was Elden Ring an anomaly? And should it hold the industry to a higher standard?
Yeah.
You could say that about a lot of, I mean, actually, those two games in particular, one came out, last year? One's coming out this year. So, you know, they shouldn't have ever opened their mouth about any of this. Like, you're in the shadow. You either get out of the shadow or get out of the way, I suppose.
Well, it's like, also like you can't tell consumers who their sole purpose is to spend money to get enjoyment how to respond to this sort of thing. You know, we're the ones that are buying these games, and if we like it, we'll talk about it. If we don't like it, some of us will shout very loudly on social media. I'm not that person, by the way, so if I really don't like something, I'm not going to just go bash it on Reddit and every other place. Right. But there are people that do. But that's the goal of the consumer. You vote with your wallet, and it's a hive mind. You know, you get enough people that just it doesn't click, then your game's going to suffer in the scores and it, you know, the money that it makes and everything. And
yeah. I know there's frame of mind, but it just came out all wrong. To me, it seems a little crybaby, like, well, you know, I hope you're not used to fresh roses because we're going to give you
plastic
blades of grass for, you know, years and years, and I hope you're okay with that. So, you know, it doesn't come off very well at all. So, you know, it's whatever at this point. Like, you know, they're going to have to adapt and at least try to do something similar. And even if it's not, you know, it doesn't have to be AAA, Baldur's Gate 3, you know, all of the things that we discussed last episode with the voice acting and the, you know, 13 different language, you know, scripts and the more words than what did I say? Lord of the Rings combined and
Game of Thrones
more
or something.
More cinematics than Game of Thrones was ever capable of doing, which is, you know, just all that. It's like no one's going to be able to top that. The only company that might actually be able to do that again would be Larian, I suppose, if this game does what everyone's expecting it to. So
yes,
you know, we'll just let it rest, you know.
I don't think anybody is and that's the thing, like reasonable, logical people aren't expecting game companies to do that. But what they are expecting is a relative amount of effort. So Larian has put a massive amount of effort into Baldur's Gate 3. We would, Blizzard, if you put out your next MMO, people are going to expect a relative amount of effort with World of Warcraft or other MMOs. And that was New World's biggest launch downfall, is you had the big three, WoW, ESO, Final Fantasy XIV, that were kind of like, across all consoles. Well, not WoW, but WoW's the unkillable beast. So, but New World comes out, like, sorry, we need a relative amount of effort for your size and your studio to match the relative amount of effort that was put into those other games as big MMOs. So it's, most reasonable people are not going to expect, a little indie studio to put out a CRPG that is the same breadth of Baldur's Gate 3. But there are plenty of unreasonable people in this world. I'm in Missouri, so there's plenty of them here.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, got that out of the way. Let's move on. You've got a long list here. Well, not a long list of just features of the game that are worth discussing.
Oh,
and why don't you walk us through those?
Yeah, just a few little snippets in case anyone has missed some of these things, because some of these little features of the game don't necessarily pop out or have been discussed a whole lot. But these are features that I thought would be really fun to talk about, that I think are really unique and really cool that they've added them to the game. First being the in-game newspaper. Mm-hmm. So the city of Baldur's Gate has an actual newspaper called Baldur's Mouth, and that's a real newspaper in lore. And so Baldur's Gate 3 will have an in-game newspaper that will react to your choices, which is really, really cool. So you'll actually be able to pick up, go to the, buy you a copy of Baldur's Mouth right here. And you'll be able to go to the NPC and, give me a copy. And you'll be able to take it and, oh, look, it's me. And, see what you and your party have gotten up to. So, if you've set fire to a village or murdered a bunch of bandits on the road, there might be a mention of you, in the newspapers. So that it's just really, really neat.
And keen-eared listeners will have noticed that Katie, our friend who does the voice in the Baldur's Gate bumper, she mentions Baldur's Mouth.
Baldur's Mouth, yeah. So. Yeah. And so evidently you can also break into the office and control the press, which somehow I completely missed that little part of this article, which is really interesting. So maybe you could shape shift as a druid, I don't remember the character's name, but the druid in the D&D movie,
Honor Among Thieves. Yeah, I don't remember her name either.
Slip into a worm or something, crawl underneath it, or as a rogue, just lockpick the door, break in. I'm sure it's not like a Gutenheimer press or anything, but whatever the equivalent to that in Faerun would be. But and alter the story of the day would be kind of interesting. The second little feature that I've got listed here are musical instruments. So bards in Baldur's Gate 3 are going to be able to play an assortment of various instruments. And I don't know. So the flute, the hand drum, the lute, the lyre, not like your liar, pants on fire, but an actual lyre, violin. So let's see. Well, you can
a trombone
instruments and a trombone, saxophone, a guitar,
electric guitar. No. So before you dive into that, it's interesting to me because Larian did kind of do something similar to this. Obviously, not actual instruments, but when you play through Divinity Original Sin 2, when you create a character, you can choose one of 4 or 5 instruments, I think it is, to be the main instrument for the music in the game, your background music. And that was really neat. So, and that's, of course, not actually playing them, but again, implemented that very well in Divinity. So,
Yeah. It just says, while you cannot play these instruments in battle, a skilled musician can entertain crowds in towns, putting on a show that draws the eye, fills the heart, and leaves everyone just distracted enough so your rogue can go about their shady business unmolested. Now, stuff like this is just really, really neat.
I agree.
I don't know if you can actually perform for tips and things like that, but I guess time will tell on that.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting and fun to see that this is added to the game. So the next little thing we wanted to cover was wild shape. Wild. So
Wow.
So the druids and Baldur's Gate, and D&D 5e and previous iterations, can perform wild shape where they transform into various other creatures. So it looks like you're going to be able to shapeshift into a wolf,
Okay.
a spider, badger, there you go, a cat, who doesn't love a good kitty cat, polar bear, bear, and that looks like about it, or at least that I've seen. So, I mean, that's a number of different choices that you can transform into. So maybe you can't do the whole worm underneath the door thing, but who knows? I mean,
Badger.
maybe you can find a worm spell. I don't know. So you could learn that. But yeah, just stuff like that is really fun. That would be fun in a party to be able to do interesting things with those various forms. We won't get into the previous mentioned druid wild shape event
experience
that has transpired. Let's see. Multi-classing and respecking, which was a big deal that they announced that, because that's not in early access at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, respecking is going to be available. I know in Divinity 2 you could respec, excuse me, but you had to go back to the
mirror on the ship and
do all that.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be an NPC, evidently. You don't have to talk to a mirror type of situation. But there's going to be multi-classing in the game. And the way that works is you're not going to be able to, say, reach level 12, which is the level cap of the game. You're not going to be able to be a level 12 barbarian and a cleric, per se. You're going to have, you can only cap out at 12. So you can have 4 levels in barbarian and 8 in cleric, et cetera, et cetera. So now I'm dying. It's hot down here. It's hot down here.
Well, I will take the next one because it's the Baldur's Gate sick note. And I actually sent this. If you didn't see it, we're going to, again, put it on our Discord channel. But it was a fancy letterhead, full-blown, letter for you to send to your boss to get out of work the day Baldur's Gate 3 comes out. I sent it to my boss, and I said, this is why I'm taking off on that day. And I am just taking off anyway, but coincidence. And she said, this is great. I hope whoever made this gets the whole week off. So at least my boss is supportive of this measure, I could say. But if you haven't seen it, it's on, I think it was on Twitter. But like I said, we'll put it in our Discord in the links channel and stuff.
Yeah.
And you can view it
I
there.
also printed it out and gave it to my boss, and he laughed at me and took his chef's knife and
Chopped it in half.
ran it into my shoulder. So
That's why you're
don't
hunched
know.
over. I get it.
that's why I'm hunched over. So I don't know if
So
I don't
your
know
mileage may vary.
yeah, your mileage will definitely vary on this sick note depending on your job, but I don't know if I'll be able to get that day off, but that's all right. Well, we'll see. I don't know. I have yet to decide if I'm going to be sick on that day. So
Oh, darn.
I guess I'll just wake up that morning and figure I don't feel so
What's this
good.
cough coming on?
Yeah.
All right. History of Faerun, Shiloh. This is next up because you put this in here as a sort of primer for I would guess, important historical events.
Yeah, so a quick little rundown of some very significant moments of Faerun history. It was very, very quick, but just wanted to do 3 in particular events that wanted to focus on. The Time of Troubles, I think I maybe mentioned that last episode. It's going to be a big moment about 120 years before the events of Baldur's Gate 3. The Time of Troubles was a cataclysmic time period in the chronology of Faerun, taking place during 1358, the year then in regards, so that's 120 years prior to the events of Baldur's Gate 3. The Year of Shadows. The Time of Troubles was a period during which the deities of Faerun were forced to walk the earth in their mortal avatar forms. So they basically came down to earth almost like, say, Gandalf, like the Valar.
Yes, yeah.
It'd be similar to that, almost like angels, but these were actual deities and gods. So they're walking around actual Faerun.
Also kind of like how the Daedra do in ESO.
Correct. Yeah. Very similar to that.
Or
several major deities died during the Time of Troubles. And a handful of mortals rose to divinity. So you had this fluctuation of power. Some of the gods just didn't make it. And then mortals kind of rise up to the cream of the crop, and they're all of a sudden gods. So very interesting time.
Congrats on your promotion.
Yeah.
What do I call you now?
Buddy? The boss.
Okay.
Just call me sir. That's my dad's name.
And when this was 120 years before BG3?
120 years before the events
is that
of BG.
Events of BG2, BG1? That's around the same time frame, right?
Yeah, maybe. I honestly don't really know.
Okay. Those games are really old anyway, so.
Yeah. All right, so the next big event would be the Spell Plague, which happened about 100 years before Baldur's Gate 3, but you still see the effects of the Spell Plague to the current timeline of Baldur's Gate 3, but not nearly as rampant. The Spell Plague, called the Blue Breath of Change by the inhabitants of Abir, was a disaster that struck realm space and even the planes themselves on the date of 29, I don't know what this first word is, in the year of Blue Fire, 1385. So this is, roughly 30 years after the Time of Troubles. Yeah. So there's a real rough century here for old Faerun. And was caused by Mistress assassination at the hands of Sirik and Shar. It continued for a decade, leading to the Wailing Years, during which arcane magic ceased to function and the planet of Toril was transformed. So similar to, say, when Kralkatorrik in Guild Wars 2, the brand, very similar to that. You have these areas of almost like blue fire that kind of transformed Faerun.
Okay.
That was actually the first thing I thought of when I saw the brand. Where do you first see that? Over in
somewhere
Ascalon,
in the Char area,
the Fields of Ruin or something like that.
Yeah.
So a little quote here from the, I guess a hands-on person. The diviner Yapfil had a vision of the event. The White Queen is troubled but can't say why. The Black Queen hates the white and gives the assassin a black coat. The assassin steals upon the White Queen. She can't see him gliding through the shadows. The sword screams. The White Queen falls. Her city falls. Stones fall in the cavern to crush the soothsayer. The tree burns and thrashes in agony. Branches break. Branches twist and grow together. So it's some sort of vision that, this diviner had about the Spell Plague. But in her vision, Yafir referred to Mistra as the White Queen, and Ishar, goddess of the night, as the Black Queen. Sirik, god of murder, was the assassin, and Savras, the god of divination, was the soothsayer. This is all speculation, evidently. And the city, cavern, and tree symbolize ordered structures of magic crumbling into chaos.
So, this is a bad time for Faerun, huh?
Yeah, pretty bad century. I guess we should all take note in our current situation, maybe. Who knows? I don't know. But things are getting a little crazier now. So, coming up to the current Baldur's Gate timeline happens to be the second sundering, which the first sundering was basically what happened the first time. This is the second time this has happened. The second
think they've learned from the first.
Yeah, you think you learned. But they didn't. The second sundering, also known as the Sundering of Toril and Abir, was a great catastrophic event. I guess they should be used to it by now. In the history of the worlds of Abir and Toril, they took place during the decade of 1480s. So this is right smack dab in the middle of the current events. And what it's basically a series of unnatural disasters hit Faerun, including an earthquake, an Erebor, a plague of locusts and droughts in the southern lands, cats and dogs living together, leading to receding sea levels and increasing conflict. So it's just mass chaos out there. The second sundering brought significant changes to how the deities approached mortals. Many gods became quieter than before, causing the emergence of new priesthoods in an attempt to explain the different divine behavior in the post-sundering world. That, however, did not mean that deities no longer interacted directly with mortals. This is kind of important. Mystra was still able to directly commune with her remaining chosen. So basically you have these chosen, and there's a series of books that are devoted to certain members of these, certain gods basically have these chosen, and of course they have followers, and gods are kind of at odds with their mortal counterparts, and they're all struggling for power. That is basically the lowdown of what's going on with the Sundering. So,
classic, right there.
Classic Cataclysm stuff. And,
all right, so I think like it's hard to follow this sort of stuff, but it is like, and this is what we've talked about in, I think, a little bit in the last episode, but also like off air with our friends, like how there's so much history and lore to what is going on in the Forgotten Realms that it's kind of mind-blowing. Like it probably, or it would have to rival or even surpass like Lord of the Rings.
It's had more time, certainly. I mean,
and I would say people. Maybe, more contributors. Probably the same like with Star Wars. Like Star Wars is an IP that, you know, when it was created in the 70s and then early 80s, you know, it was the 3 movies. Mm-hmm. But then books started being written, comic books, you know, the Christmas special.
Can't forget the Christmas special.
You know, and then George Lucas puts out the prequels, and then there's more, you know, then video games, and then more books and more comics, and then the mouse buys Lucasfilms, and then there's mouse themed Star, you know, whatever. Yeah. And so I would probably put those 2 IPs, Star Wars and Forgotten Realms or Dungeons and Dragons, in the same category as far as like how fleshed out they are. Yeah. And so there are people, mega nerds like myself, that could like spend, you could probably write a dissertation on like a specific aspect of Star Wars and just pour over Legends books, Legends material, current canon stuff, whatever, and write this dissertation. And the same could probably be said for somebody that would sit there and write a dissertation on the deities and the, you know, every event the deities are involved in the Forgotten Realms. And it's just, it is honestly, as someone that, and, you know, we talked about this in the first episode, but I am new to Dungeons and Dragons in general, like just Forgotten Realms, the role-playing game, you know, all of it. I always, you know, I was raised very differently. Dungeons and Dragons was not something that I was ever allowed to interact with. But now, as I'm an adult, all I'm seeing is, you know, it's just a fantasy world. It's no different than Lord of the Rings. It's just had, you know, decades of contributing and, you know, auxiliary stories and everything written in this and about this, and, you know, how many millions of hours of games across the world have been played by people at their tabletop and, you know, using some of this information. You know, you never know. So it's It's very fascinating. So
Yeah. Yeah, and just think that this is all just the Forgotten Realms. Like there's Eberron and Dark Sun, and there's countless and Greyhawk, and there's countless other, there's completely homebrewed stuff that people run, like the Critical Role people,
Yes,
and all of that kind of stuff. So it's crazy. There's just so many possibilities of what you can do, and even just in the Forgotten Realms, like the possibilities are kind of endless. So
yeah.
So moving on, I just wanted to cover a brief rundown of some of the origin characters and companion characters, and then we can kind of get into who we'd like to, what we would like to play, and maybe what your thoughts on what kind of race, sub-race you might pick, and classes and multi-classing. We can kind of group all that together, since we're probably running a little long in the tooth right now. But so we've got origin characters. So if you're not familiar with how this game is going to work, if you want to play multiplayer with 3 of your friends, you can do that. You just have a party with just you and your friends, and there won't be origin story characters. I would personally recommend that you run both. Like you run a single player campaign alongside, which is probably what I'm going to do.
Yep.
And then when your friends can get together, you run a multiplayer campaign, because you're going to miss out on elements of these stories. And if you've played Divinity 2, like Coniff and I have, that some of the best stories in that game were, Los's, or in my, who I had,
Sabine, right?
would be Sabine, yeah. There's some really, and even the Red Princess is pretty interesting, but there's some really interesting stories that you don't get if you play a multiplayer campaign. You're not going to get in Baldur's Gate 3 because you won't have any of these fools in your party. So Asterion is I guess I'll just briefly go over these guys for what I know of them, from playing like the hour or two that I've played of the early access. Asterion is basically an elf vampire, and a lot of these people have the same mind flare
ailment.
bug, ailment, predisposed disposition that you do. But he's also a rogue, so he's a elf vampire rogue, a little haughty, and I don't know, interesting character, that's for sure. Lae'zel is a Githyanki, and if you don't know exactly what a Githyanki is, we'll have some links in our Discord.
Yep.
You can also Google it yourself. But they're kind of a green-skinned, I don't know, like a pretty
like
orc.
An elf orc.
Yeah, like a pretty orc. I don't know. Or even the males are like elf orc, I guess it'd be.
They got the ears and
Yeah, they got the ears and kind of pointy features of an elf, but they're green-skinned and have kind of almost like a skeletal little nose thing going on.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, but she's a warrior. I guess would be like a fighter type of class. Gale, who's a wizard, human, and. I don't really want to go into the backstory of these characters. Shadowheart.
Well, yeah, because you're going to explore it.
Yeah,
I think
that's the fun thing.
Yes.
Shadowheart, who's a cleric of Shar, which we had mentioned. That's not necessarily the best thing, although we'll get to my book segment here in a little bit.
She's joining my party, and I will keep her alive at all
Coniff
costs. Unlike our friends Tempest and Jeff and Spin and whomever else.
Well, yeah, and. Tempest and I ended up killing her.
Yeah,
3
exactly.
times on the
And
beach.
Spin did it too, and but not me. I'm keeping her alive.
Keeping you alive, damn it. We have Will, which I've never met some of these the last 2 characters, because I've basically played around on the beach and picked up seashells and killed Shadowheart.
I think Will is the bear druid in Question. Right.
No, that is. We'll get to him in a second.
Oh,
so
Halcyon,
Will is I think he's a warlock.
Okay.
Yeah, he's definitely a warlock. human, and Karlach, who's a tiefling barbarian. And she, evidently, there's a lot of backstory with her in a recent D&D hardcover book called Descent into Avernus or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah, so her backstory is pretty interesting from the sounds of it.
Cool.
Most interesting character is one that they've added recently, and that's the Dark Urge. So if you don't know, this is a character that you can play as. I don't think you don't meet, like the rest of these characters, these origin characters, you can either meet out in the world or you pick up for your party, right off the bat. Actually, you can either play one of them as your character, or you can pick up these people down the road. And the Dark Urge, not so much. This is kind of you play as the Dark Urge, and that's it. You can have some of these other characters in your party, but you have to be the Dark Urge. You don't just run into the quote unquote Dark Urge. So you don't really know. It's basically an amnesia type of character, but you have this almost serial killer-esque kind of tendencies, I suppose, that you can either put down or go with. And that's kind of the way that they've described it. And they had some really interesting, funny, and kind of almost disturbing stuff that they released at the most recent what's that event that they run?
Panel from Hell or something?
Panel from
crazy.
Hell, yeah. So that'll be an interesting choice if you want to run that. I've heard a lot of people have really enjoyed running that, but I don't think I'll be going that route. It sounds a little pretty dark, but that option's there.
Yes.
So there's a few others from the original games. Minsk, Jahira, and Halsin are all reported to be companion characters. So they won't be available for you to play right off the bat like these origin characters were, but they'll be available to add to your party, kind of like in the original BG 1 and 2. And then there's another character, Minthara, who I don't really know much about.
Yep.
So, so
do you want to go through, we're up to classes and races, right?
Yeah.
Do you want you talk about the races, and I will run through the classes, and then and then we'll pick which ones are you going to play. Like, what's your primary interest? So
yeah.
So what races do we got, Shiloh?
Races. So, man, this is a long list. I'm going to speed read these best I can. Actually, I won't go into sub races because that just gets way involved.
Yeah.
But so early access, you did not have access to the Dragonborn. That will be in the August 3rd release. So you'll basically be able to play as a big dragon man or dragon woman, which is cool. Dragonborn are really interesting characters. Drow, which, if you want to play as Drist or a pretty dark elf, you can do that. Dwarf, got to have a dwarf.
Yeah.
Elves, Githyanki, gnomes, which are always fun if you don't punt them. Half elves.
Gnome barbarian, let's go.
Yeah. Half elves. And the half elves, to be noted, I didn't say I was going to cover the subclasses, but it is cool that the half elf not only covers just half like high elves, but they cover half high elves, half wood elves, half drow. So you can be any of those basically any of the elves, you can be a human elf hybrid. So
Gotcha.
It makes it kind of interesting. Half orc is another one that has not been in early access. That's going to be available on August 3rd. Halfling, human, and tiefling. So
Nice.
yeah. And there are various sub races. You can, I'll put a link in in our Discord. It's a long list, and I don't want to cover all this stuff. Interesting. Well, I will point out one last thing. The Dragonborn will be your sub race will be basically based on a colored dragon that you're akin to. So you've got like black, blue, brass, bronze, copper. Unfortunately, you cannot be a Tiamat dragonborn.
That'd be too powerful.
Yeah, that would be pretty insane. But you would look cool. You'd look like a big rainbow, I suppose. But yeah, so that's interesting. And I think your breath attack is based on what type of, just like your dragon, your breath attack is based on what color dragon you are. So your dragonborn will have that same sort of basic powers. So
neat.
Yeah. Well, tell us about classes. So this is going to be interesting.
Yes, there are 12 classes, I think, with several subclasses. But it's barbarian, and I'm not going to get into all the subclasses. I'll just mention a few that are kind of notable. Barbarian, so a wild magic barbarian is a possibility in Baldur's Gate 3, and I know our friend Tempest is very much excited about that prospect. Yeah. Then there's bard, there's cleric, there's druid, a fighter, the new one that wasn't around in early access, monk. So that'll be exciting. Mm-hmm. We'll get to it, but that's one that I want to play. Paladin, ranger, a rogue, a sorcerer, a warlock, and then wizard with several schools of magic. But to get back to the monk, so just to get it out of the way, we had this idea that for one of our groups, and Shiloh, you probably remember this conversation, but our friend Jeff was like, what if we each play a Way of the Four Elements, which is one of the subclasses of monk. We each play a War of the Four Elements monk, but we only stick with a single element. So we've got all four of us at a different element. I think that could be pretty fun. It'd probably make it pretty difficult, but yeah, it would still be like, that's the type of stuff that you're going to be able to do in this game, you know, with this collection of races and, you know, classes. Like, there's just so much that you could possibly create, like so many combinations. And, you know, and that's even before you start to think about multi-classing and everything. So my initial, what I really want to play is a Four Elements monk, but I also want to do a lore bard. With that said, I've never really felt like I've gotten a good druid or like earth shaman sort of experience in any of these RPGs that we've played, like the MMOs and stuff. I guess like a warden in ESO was like pretty close. But I do want to try a druid, especially for the wild shape thing. But yeah, for sure, I'm playing a Four Elements monk in one of my playthroughs, and maybe I'll keep the lore bard to my solo playthrough. I don't know. What about you? What's your initial, like, you just want to dive into it?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm honestly on the fence about what to bring to the table in the multiplayer campaign.
And we'll probably have a discussion about that, right? Like,
yeah, because a lot of it depends on what I think for group makeup, and I know probably a lot of it doesn't really, you know, you're not gonna,
you don't min-max
meta. I don't. Maybe I'm falling prey to that. But if there's another wizard or if there's another magic-based character, it would be kind of like, well, maybe I'll go a different route. But my initial instinct is I do want to play a warlock, probably a Feypack warlock, I'm thinking, maybe like a half drow. But I also, I do want to play like a rogue type character.
Yeah.
Maybe a halfling rogue or something like that. I know Tempest made fun of me because I made it halfling rogue. Why are you a child?
You only want to play rogue because
I'm a child. I'm a halfling.
You were so influenced by Sabine from Divinity 2 and how she carried your team. I know that Cash, our friend, he also had Sabine in his party, and he said the same thing in Divinity 2, is that she just literally she carried the party. I did not have Sabine. I instead had Floor Lord original character Coniff, and and had to be carried by the Beast, Red Prince, and Losa. So, but yeah, so Rogue sounds interesting too. I know our friend Weevil probably will end up with a halfling or gnome rogue in a playthrough. So yeah.
But there's so much, it might just end up with me going, all right, this is what we're doing. And I don't, because they all look fun. They all have a place, and it's just going to be like, well, okay, this is going to be my character. I'm not really set in stone on any particular things. So
gotcha.
It'll be interesting. We'd like to hear from you all. Like, what do you plan on playing if you're going to be playing Baldur's Gate 3? Like we said before, join our Discord. You can send us a tweet, email us, all those things. You can do all of them if you want. We'd like to hear from you. What are you most looking forward to? What kind of group comp? Actually, let's pose the question. What do you think Shiloh should bring to the table at our D&D online Baldur's Gate 3?
Yes.
All multiplayer comp.
Knowing that Coniff in that composition will be bringing a 4 elements monk. Yeah. What should Shiloh bring? That's the question.
Yep. And I think that Jeff is going to bring a cleric.
Good, because I'll be on the floor, I'm sure. So he'll be able to rest
I've heard
me.
the monk's pretty good. I'll probably be dead.
All right, there's one last section of this episode. This has been a long episode, but a really fun episode.
Yeah.
But I made something for you, Shiloh, because I felt like this special little mini segment needed its own little introduction. So, yeah.
All right, class, settle down. It's time for book reports. Shiloh, why don't you kick us off?
Well, thank you. Our book report for this episode, Forgotten Realms book for episode 2, is going to be Twilight Falling by Paul S. Kemp. So I'm going to read a brief little, this is quote unquote from the Amazon store, as the kids like
already
to call
plagiarism. You're getting docked a letter grade.
Yep, I'm getting a Bezos letter in the mail right after this. So. Then I just point to my checking account and be like, look how much money I spent with you guys.
And how little you have
care.
to take from me.
Yeah. So anyway, it's a brief little synopsis of what this book is about. Newly dedicated to the mask, an assassin turned butler returns to the shadowy lifestyle he once left behind. Sounds interesting so far, huh? Mm-hmm. Over 1 decade ago, the Night Knives placed spy Erebus Kale into the wealthy Uskiven household, tasking him with gathering intel that would tarnish the family's name. But as Kale's relationship with his employers deepened with time, he grew tired of serving 2 masters and ultimately sided with Themelon, the Uskiven patriarch. Now Themelon lies dead and the sun is set on Kale's service to the family. But just when his future seems more uncertain than ever, a letter arrives from a prominent figure from his past. By day's end, Kale has dedicated himself to a new master, one who is beyond the petty accumulation of wealth. After all, what is good to one who trades in souls?
After all, what is gold to one who trades in souls? That's a good point. Yes.
Yeah.
So you've read this one then? Is that on your bookshelf behind you right now? I see a Paul S. Kemp.
Loaned. Oh yeah, that's one of his solo novels. It's not related to D&D, but it's very good too. No, actually, I lent this book out to. This is part 1 of really a 6-part series. But really, this is book 1 of 3, and then there's another 3 that follow this series of books. The Erebus Kale trilogy or series is what you would call this. But I lent this book out. I don't remember who has it, but I haven't seen it back. So But it is...
Sorry for your loss.
Yeah, this whole series probably my favorite out of any of the Forgotten Realm series that I've read, even more so than our previous mention of Brimstone Angels, and
Nice.
and honestly the Driss novels, which I do love, but this probably takes the cake. There's an interesting cast of characters. It's a lot darker, although there's a lot of dark elements to Aaron M. Evans' Brimstone Angels, the Tiefling saga of Ferida and Havilar, but because they're dealing with demons and all of that. But this is a lot more shadowy, but there's a whole lot of Shar and Mask, and you really get a feel for, all this god plotting that, it really gives
more
you
like
a sense of
political intrigue then.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of and it's political intrigue between not just, petty humans and elves and stuff. These are political intrigue involving gods, which is pretty akin to, like you mentioned before, Elder Scrolls Online, or the Elder Scrolls in general with the Daedra and all their little squabbles and petty stuff that they get involved in. So this is, it dives really hard into that, and Kale is kind of torn between a lot of different things and meets some really, really interesting characters along the way. One that may or may not be a chosen of Mask. So, yeah, very, very highly recommended from the old Shiloh.
Nice. Well, there's your book report. So, wow. That's a lot in one episode. I am about to fall asleep. Not because you're boring, but because I'm getting older.
Pretty boring.
No, you're very exciting. But listener, thank you for, again, just showing us your support, especially after the first episode. It's always great to see. And for all of our friends that are already in our Discord server, we look forward to, one, discussing this episode with you guys, but also, getting your thoughts on Baldur's Gate 3 and all that entails. Shiloh, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom before I hit the button?
No, just looking forward to the launch, and just if you're listening, please jump in our Discord. Love to hear about your thoughts. Kind of join in the hype for this game. It's been 23 years in the making almost. So
arguably, yeah.
I mean, well, not 23 years in the making, but it's been due for 23 years. It's the last time we had a Baldur's Gate game. So
yeah.
So jump on in. Love to talk to you. And everyone have a good week. Stay hydrated and cool.
Yes.
And it's all of America, I think. Probably, I know it's headed towards Europe too. So.
Yes. Next episode of Questing the Multiverse is going to be all about our initial impressions on this game when it launches on the 3rd. Necromancy for RuneScape is the 7th. There's so much stuff in August. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. We will see you or talk to you in the next episode. Peace.
Ciao. Questing the Multiverse is brought to you in part by Coniff Productions, House Wood Designs, and Joel Crawford. To follow along with our adventures, please follow us on Twitter at QTM Podcast and consider joining our Discord, a link of which can be found in the show notes or in our Twitter bio. Want your questions or comments read on the show? Email us at questingthemultiverse@gmail.com. Finally, if you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a review or a follow wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for listening.